Welcome to our last lesson for full stack development, focusing on the backend part, right? Let's do the part 2 for consuming REST API. Okay, we'll talk about adding data to the database via the API and protecting data integrity with data validation. So we take in the form data submitted by a user, could be a post input, right? Process it and post it to the API. So things that you need to do: make the review form aware which location the review will be called for, create a route for the form to post to, send the new review data to the API, send the new review in place on the details page. Okay, first item on your list involves getting the ID of the location, the parent, right? And getting the add review page in such a way that you can use it when the form is submitted. After all, this ID is the unique identifier that the API needs to add a review. Okay. So, so you would have a router object that has a dot post, right? For this route locations, location ID, review, and new, right? And a post that would do a call the control locations that do add review. Okay. So we try to add the placeholder and test it out. Don't forget to export it. Okay. So to fix the location detail view, right? You would have to add the location ID to the link for the review, add button. Note that you now use a JavaScript template string for the href value. Okay. So the button would execute this one, the add review. Next, you want to make sure that the form posts to the correct URL. We always have this in get requests, and we'll just change it to a post request. Okay. Then you want to post the form to the same as the URL. Okay. Easy way to achieve this is set the action of the form to be an empty string and set the method to be post. So here's an example with the post. Okay. So the render review form, right, would render this pod template and have the following change of values with title and page header, right? For the get requests, right? We also have the render review form, right? It will basically get the review form. Not really. Yeah, so on the add review page, you want to display the name of location to retain a sense of context for the user. So they know that, so they would know which review again that they're trying to add to, right? You want to hit the API again, give it the ID of the location, and get the information back to the controller and into the view, right? Rather than duplicate the code, we have to maintain two pieces. You'll go for the don't repeat yourself approach. The details page and the add review page both want to call the API to get the location information and then do something with it. So in your get location info, right, you specify the path and request option, right? And now you want to have the callback as a third parameter for the get location info, right? In your request module, right, or request function, you would include the request options, the request headers, and then the callback function. And if status code is 200, update the chords with the API response and do a callback, right? Else show an error. Okay. So third is you let's see, get location info. Okay, and then you just basically render a detail page, right? Same goes for add review. You get location info and then render a review form. Okay, so it still has some hard-coded data, so let's use data from the API. So review and then the location name with the string interpolation $, and not string, this is not string interpolation, basically using the variable, Okay, and now we have review star cups, and this would be dynamically, that would change if we review Queen Burger. Then I mean, if you click that add form, add review, right, you would have review Queen Burger, right? So the plan for the controller, we have to get the location ID to construct the API request URL, then get the data posted in the form and package it up for the API, right? Make the API call, show the new review in place if successful, display an error if not successful. Going back, it means that you grab the location ID again, right? And then the form data here. And so when you click submit, then you can make the post request, right? So mapping the names of the form fields to the model paths expected by the API. So the name for form field pertains to the author, the rating to the rating, and review to the review text. So going back, this is the form field, okay? And we do want to map them for our model, right? So create a new object containing the variable names, right, that the API expects, and use the request body to get the values from the posted form, right? So whatever values they've inputted in the form, and then when they click add review, the API server would get access to the request body name, and we can also parse the int for the rating and the review, and assign it first to a variable called post data, so we can easily use that variable, right? So here's the sequence again. So when the do add review is invoked, we'll get the location ID. We prepare the path, and we create a post data object. Okay, and then request options. We define the headers such as the following: the post request JSON, and we can now reuse that in the request function. And the second parameter with the error status code body, if successfully created, then let's do a redirect, right? So this one gives us this scenario wherein I'm typing, and then I basically filled up all the fields: the name, the rating, the reviews, and then I hit add my review, and it was successful. Then me as a user, I would get thrown back to the that specific location, right? It won't let me stay in the add review form, right? If I do want to do add review again, I would click that button and it would show me an add review form. And let's say I can add another review, and when I click that submit, then it lets me go back to that specific location, the location for info. Okay. Okay, else show error. So here, I do this, it should put me back in the details page. Okay, protecting data integrity with data validation. Okay, if someone adds an email address, you would want that it's in an email address form with the @ sign and a dot operator, I mean a dot symbol, right? So you can add validation to your application to prevent people submitting empty reviews, right? So there are 3 levels you can add validation: client side, right? So in the HTML portion or the pug, right? Application level, before we even send a query to the database, right? And then the schema level as well, when we prepare the data for the query. Okay, so validating the data is the most important part, so you don't have bad data to begin with. And the final step. So adding validation in the schema, we've done this. Last time we let it make that it's required. We can add some typing as well to say that the author should not be numerical. It should be a type of string. So it's like names, right? And now the rating is now required instead of default. And review text should be string and should be required. Created on is not required, but we can automatically generate that with the default and use the date object and call the date the now method, so that it basically creates a timestamp. So when it's saved, you can no longer save a review without any review text, and you'll get an error. But instead of an error, which is annoying, right? So why not do some validation checks in the client side? Let's see if it would talk about this one. So if you try to save a document with one or more required passes missing or empty, Mongoose returns an error. Yes. It does this without having to make the call to the database, because Mongoose itself holds the schema and knows what is and isn't required. So that's good. It does not request to the database right away, right? It doesn't adds a traffic, that one. So you add the following snippet to show an example of such an error, right? So this is for a Mongoose validation error, and message validation failed, name validation error, and the review text, and so on and so forth, right? So this would just say which part is missing. So is it review text, right? Something like that. Okay, so you can also console log, right? So that people can check in the browser or in the terminal, right? Console log. So if there's any error, show the error. And we've done this before, right? We have been throwing errors, right? The API returns this message as the response 400. Okay. Following listing shows this code in place inside the request statement callback for the do add review function. And as you can see here, wherein you have the status code and the name. So you add a check to see whether the status is 400 and the body as a name, and that name is a validation error. If we do get that validation error string, then we can redirect them to the new review form, right? And have the error flag in the query string. So instead of redirecting back to the specific location info, it's just there. We go back to the review form, right? So you need to send a variable to the view if you see the error parameter passed in the query string. So do check out your URL, right? The render review form function is responsible for passing variables into the view. When it's called, it's also passed the request object, which contains the query object, making it easy to pass the error parameter when it exists. So parse your request headers or request objects, sorry. So then, as we mentioned, you can now use the request.query.error to access that and assign it to a new variable. Let's call it error, right? And now we can reuse if error is equals to val, right? And let's just put an alert. So it would a dialog box would pop from your top and would say all fields required, please try again. Yep, you would see this red marking. And then now when an API returns a validation error, you can catch it and display a message to the user. So this is better for the user experience instead of just getting a 400 page, 404 page, right? So it adds as an error for them to know what to fix, right? So validation at the schema level is the backstop final line of defense, right? So you should not solely rely on that. Add validation in the application level. So let's say required for review simple, you can add some simple checks. Okay, test fails, redirect user back to the form and flag the query string as before. Same thing. Okay, so here the do add review, we have the request params location ID. As usual, we need to gather the parent. Post data, review rating, review text. Let's see. I think we should go next. Yep. So this is the validation. It's an if statement. If there's no author value from the post data, or if there's no rating value from the post data, or if there's no review text value from the post data, then redirect me back to the review form, right? And add the query string error val, right? And else, just throw in all the errors and meaning, sorry, else, then we can do the request, right? We can do the post request. So we are validating the application level before we even communicate or do a subsequent a request. Okay. So that's the application level, right? Keeps the user on the same page. Keeps the JavaScript running in the browser. Express treats the content of this folder as statics files to be downloaded to the browser instead of on the server. If you don't have a folder called JavaScripts in your public folder, create one now. Okay, create a validation.js so that you can listen for submit event to the review form. You check required fields and if any are empty. So here's adding a jQuery form validation. So it means that if the add review button is clicked and has this submit, right? The function it would basically pass the event there, right? So we would now do an alert danger.hide, hide that danger field. But if the input name .val is null or does not exist, and the rating, the value for the rating does not exist, or the review area, meaning there was no any input there, right, for in the form, then show this alert danger, right? So that is the red warning sign, and show it, right? So then an else would be prepend. So the this now pertains to the object, right? And then it would basically we would basically add this div tag that includes a error message, right, saying all fields are required, please try again. So just remember to include this jQuery file at the end of the body along with the other client-side JavaScript. So okay. So summary, we have done validations for the model side, the application level, and the client side. So again, there's multiple catch-all, so you have multiple ways to catch an error as well. Okay, so we have finished the backend portion, and then we build the REST APIs. We have separated the application server to the API server. We have managed from the API server side and managing the requests from the application server, right, and throwing back a response. And we also manage the application server where we now utilize the response we got from the API server, right? And then lastly, we've done all the data validation. So we've done a good job in this class. So you can continue working on the front end portion with the textbook. We do teach this in another class with the front end course, just because it's not recommended to just have 10 weeks and do all the full stack, right? But in any case, if you're interested and curious, don't hesitate to reach out to me and we can work on the Angular part. Okay, thank you very much. I enjoyed having you guys, and keep on coding.